Thank you both so much for joining us here. Frank, I want to start with you. Briefly recap for us what happened last year. I know you were not on Capitol Hill when the attack took place, but you went back later in the evening. What did you say to Republicans? What was your argument that they needed to let the certification continue?
I argued with them profusely that things had changed, that this was a critical moment in the American democratic process, and that they need to rethink. It was not an attempt. That vote was not about overturning an election. It was simply about going back to the states and re-examining the vote and how it took place. But even that statement had to be pulled back because of what had happened earlier in the day. And I was outside on Pennsylvania Avenue, just 2 blocks away from the Capitol, as the insurrection happened. And I realized that there are Republicans out there that hate the word riot or hate the word insurrection. All you have to do is watch the video and be outside, and you'll know that this was a very different set of people, a very different mood. And our democracy, a year later, has still not fully recovered from it. But the challenge right now, we have politicians who've taken what was on boil, and it should be on simmer, and I'm not a cook, but I know the difference between putting a pot on simmer and one on boil. It's now on burn. That the objective is to tear down the other side. And you heard it on your program here. That on Bloomberg, we shouldn't be having these conversations about extremism. We should be focused on the future. What does it mean for markets? What does it mean for investment? What does it mean for American democracy? The incivility and the anger that is out there is palpable. We measure it in polling. But my issue is that no politician is standing up and saying, enough is enough. Stop this. Sit down, shut up, and start doing your job. Start cooperating, start compromising, and getting stuff done. We have inflation out of control. We have shortages out of control. We've got crime setting records, people flooding over the border. Get your crap together. Learn from January 6th, but start working together for the future.
Tim O'Brien, let me bring you into this conversation. Frank says that no elected official is doing that, and that's partly because you can't win an election that way. We don't even agree on the basic facts of what happened last year on January 6th. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about it. How much can elected officials move forward with the business of running the government and running the nation if we don't agree on basic facts?
Well, I don't think you can run a nation or a government when you're fomenting propaganda and an assault on democracy that makes it impossible to allow the wheels of government to turn. Or as Frank just pointed out, it's not good for markets. It's not good for a stable society. And we have to be very clear-eyed and uncompromising in recognizing January 6th for what it was. It was an attempted coup. We have to recognize in the months that followed, the GOP, and it is primarily and indistinctly the Republican Party, are trying to undermine the basic foundations of democracy in terms of enfranchising voters and in terms of making sure that the electoral process itself is sacrosanct. You're seeing a lot of machinations within state legislatures to put in place, I think, the possibility that votes can get overturned. We'll see the first evidence of this in the midterms. It's going to come to loom large again in the presidential election in 2024. And I think the reason that members of the Republican Party aren't standing up more forcefully is they've started to become captive to Trumpism. And I'm defining Trumpism as counterfactualism and authoritarianism wedded together, I think, to move people in directions, I think, that will either only lead to anarchy or fascism.
Well, speaking of Trumpism, Tim, we just got a statement in from former President Trump moments ago. In that statement, he says, quote, Biden, who is destroying our nation with insane policies of open borders, corrupt elections, disastrous energy policies, unconstitutional mandates, and devastating school closures, used my name today to try to further divide America. This political theater is all just a distraction for the fact that Biden has completely and totally failed. Frank, I want to get your response to that. Interesting to me also because Biden didn't, in fact, mention Trump's name in the speech that he gave this morning.
I thought that there's a number of very strong lines in Biden's speech, and while it won't be remembered a month from now, he is trying to set a different tone. Obviously, Donald Trump is going to find nothing positive in it, just as Biden finds nothing positive in Trump. But in the end, we don't have a choice. These are the things that were given us. And I would say that over the last 9 months, 10 months, the Republicans went from about -10 on the generic ballot on who you'd rather have run Congress to now +8. So as we've been going through this discussion of what happened on January 6th and the Democratic strategy of keeping a focus on it, the Republicans have gained the biggest advantage over Democrats in terms of who the public wants to run Congress, the biggest advantage they have ever had in the history of polling. So as a strategy, what the Democrats are doing, you heard the language. Congressman Liu's an awesome guy, very effective for his constituents, but you heard his language. And the American people aren't responding favorably to that extremism, just as they disliked and resented what happened on January 6th. Both sides, Democrats and Republicans alike, need to cut it out, or the public is going to punish them this November.
Frank, you've watched so closely the internal evolution of the GOP over the last couple of decades. You're a shrewd observer of it. In a really practical way, though, when you talk about your concerns about the direction the party's headed in, and that people have to wake up or people have to take steps to counter what we're seeing. We have institutions under assault, particularly, I think, the judiciary and obviously our political system. What practical, beyond simply saying, I guess, people need to stand up and be counted and follow a different script, what are the practical and realpolitik things people need to do right now in the GOP if they're authentically concerned about democracy?
That they actually have to find people who will find common ground. I'll give you 2 examples. The Problem Solvers Caucus, which is made up of half Republicans and half Democrats, both in the Senate and the House. They meet every week, and they're working together, and they're trying to find compromise. And in fact, they got the infrastructure bill through because of the Problem Solvers Caucus. That weekly effort at compromise and cooperation makes a meaningful, measurable difference. A second example is I want Tim Scott to step up. I want Ben Sasse to step up. There are a number of senators, John Thune, we're waiting to see if he's running for re-election, a number of Republican leaders who have the ability to talk to Democrats and want to. And they're ideologically conservative, but they believe in democracy. They believe in the institutions, and they want to make those institutions work more efficiently, more effectively, and most importantly, more accountably. So your question is dead on. It requires these individual people, good communicators, have considerable support among conservatives. They need to step up and take leadership positions. John Barrasso from Wyoming, the senator. The more that we hear from them, the more likely it is that the Republicans have a message machine and a policy that can actually get things done and do so in a way that brings people together rather than blowing them apart.
Except that they are silent right now, and they remain silent at the moment. Tim, you've written about President Trump and his business dealings, Trump Nation. He sued you, which was later dismissed. He unleashed a movement, right? But how much do his participants now drive Trumpism as opposed to the former president himself? I think about how he talked about claiming credit for the vaccines, which of course came through during his administration, and his audience booed him. How much does he really drive the Trumpism train? Well,
Trump still drives the Trumpism train, but there's I think, the reality that it's also going to overtake him at some point. The seditionists that he inspired on January 6th ended up saying they felt betrayed by him. As you noted, Scarlett, when he said that he had gotten a booster, he was booed. The reality of Trumpism is that everyone has to toe the line, including and especially Trump himself, if it's going to retain its sort of momentum. And that obviously goes beyond Trump, and that's why there's a danger there. The GOP has recognized that Trumpism in its current form wins votes. It changes the hearts and minds of voters. And there's no real incentive for enough people, I think, in the GOP, I think despite some of the examples that Frank provided, to really get the party to change course. We are in very dangerous times, and I think people are going to have to stand up for their values, because primarily for Trump, he's fomenting a cult. He enjoys the accolades and the attention he gets. He doesn't care about the consequences of the kind of bile he's embracing and the divisions he's sowing. And there's nothing on the horizon right now that's going to stop that.
And it's also having an impact globally. We do work with a company called Premise, and they've had their polling in Asia, Europe, Africa, South America shows that faith in American democracy is falling. And yet here's what's ironic. According to the Premise surveys, there is more faith in American democracy outside America than there is inside America. I think it's ironic, but we better pay attention to it because our image and our situation with China, Russia, Iran is very tenuous. And if they believe that we're weak, if they believe that we are truly divided and that we cannot act, we're going to have a real problem as a country.
And we're going to pick up on exactly that question of the domestic dialogue surrounding American democracy when we're back. Frank and Tim, thank you both so much for joining us. That was FIL CEO and politics and communications consultant Frank Luntz and Bloomberg Opinion senior columnist Tim O'Brien. Thank you both so much for your time.